Well, Halloween is just 1 week away, and we are getting into the spooky spirit this morning with the help of the Connecticut Historical Society. Their collection, get this, includes more than 4 million artifacts, including some stuff with ties to the darker side of Connecticut history. So joining us now is Andrea Rapacz, Director of Collections at the CT Historical Society. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Oh, good morning. I'm glad to be here to talk about Halloween and spooky things.
Halloween, spooky season, my favorite season, so I'm really excited about this. 4 million artifacts.
Yes.
Very impressive. Let's get right into this. Start us off with the first artifact that you want to show off.
Sure. So it's Halloween season, talking about witches. And so when you usually think about witchcraft in New England, you think about Salem and the panic that happened in 1692. But really, Connecticut had its own witchcraft or witch panic about 40 years earlier. The first person hanged in Connecticut and the colonies was Alice Young in 1647. And after that, about 9 women and 2 men were hanged over the next 15 years. A few years pass, people are still being accused of witchcraft, and that brings us to this first document here, and Catherine Harrison of Wethersfield. She was a wealthy widow who lived in town. She got into a fight with a bunch of her neighbors. She was accused of witchcraft 4 times. She was convicted once, but because the jury couldn't decide what to do with her, she was allowed to be free in town. And so 38 men in Wethersfield signed this complaint against her. And this is one of our oldest documents here. If you move over to this side, this complaint was written in the middle. Bring it into the middle? Yep, thank you.
There it is.
So about 1669 that was written.
That's crazy. And you think about the witch trials, you know, that existed here in Connecticut as well.
That's right.
Which is important to point out. How do you guys get your hands on this stuff?
So we've been around for almost 200 years. So this stuff has come in. This has been in our collection for over 100 years.
Wow. So let's move on because we do have limited time.
Indeed.
What's next?
So it's just talking about how witchcraft was in the consciousness. So we have this book here from 1728 called Kingdom of Darkness. And it really is just filled with stories of supernatural things that were occurring around. This was actually published in London, but would have been sold in the colonies. So it has this great graphic here of people consorting with the devil.
Spooky.
It is spooky. So when we move from witchcraft, we move towards a little more spooky, but dealing with death and how we commemorate and memorialize people who have died. This first item we have here is a death mask.
Yeah, this is the one that scares me the most, I think.
Is it?
Hopefully it doesn't trigger a curse in the Fox 61 studios like the Annabelle doll or something.
Right. So it shouldn't. So this is a face mask of Horace Wells, who was a dentist in Hartford in the 1840s. He's credited with discovering anesthesia as the use of a painkiller during surgical operations. So he had kind of a tragic end. He had addiction issues. He spent some time in prison and tragically died by suicide. A relative of his wife asked that he get a plaster cast of his face. And because he was a dentist, he knew people who knew how to make plaster casts. The original plaster cast is in the Boston Medical Library, and this one was redone in 1940 by Leonard Krask, a bronze sculptor. So there's still a Horace Wells Club today where they try to promote the work that he did.
Great.
So that's the death mask.
And what do we have right here?
Sure. And so these are some mourning pins. So as after people died in the Victorian period, they spent a lot of time mourning and trying to let people know that they were mourning. So people would wear pins like this, and they'd have locks of hair. If you can get a close-up of one of them, the hair is braided inside. Not all hair jewelry is mourning pieces, but sometimes a good indicator is if it has some black enamel on it or some other jewels that try to indicate that that's what it is.
Interesting. And really quickly,
Indeed.
We have these lovely feet pictures.
Oh, sure. So these are more creepy and icky than really spooky, but depending what's happening.
Toes right there.
So this is the foot of a Civil War soldier named James Wilbraham from Enfield, and he had gotten frostbite on his teeth and contracted gangrene. So you can see where the tissue is dying on his toes. This is actually 2 of a series of 4 where he shows the progression of the disease working through. So the dead tissue of his toes is the first one, followed by the amputation where his toes are removed.
Wow, it's so interesting to see all of this stuff. I've been to the CT Historical Society. You guys are doing incredible work at preserving the state's history.
Thank you.
Tell us about, really quickly, some upcoming events, because we have to wrap, because you guys are
Sure.
doing some awesome stuff.
Yeah, so right on the heels of Halloween is the Dia de los Muertos, is a holiday that falls on November 1st. But CHS is doing a full-day family event on October 29th. So from 10 to 5, it's going to be craft, food, music. So we want everyone to come on down for that. And then we also have an exhibition on the history of bicycles that's going to be a little bit different for us. It has games, and it's going to be very interactive. So,
very cool. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us this
You're
morning.
welcome.
Really, really appreciate it.
You
This
bet.
is awesome. I mean, not awesome because it's very spooky and some of this stuff is very scary, but very cool to see in person.
Great.
Thank you
you.
so much.
You're
Okay, the
welcome.
time now